Hi everyone, welcome back to SmugMug Live. Thank you for joining us today, wherever you are in the world. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. So as always, we're going to have a little chat with one of our friends today. We're going to have David Grover from Capture One join us. As I said in the promotion, he's going to give us some insight into some of the cool stuff that Capture One has to offer. But before that, give yourself a shout out in the chat window. I say this every time. It's always nice to see who's joining us and where you're joining from. So I'll put a little link, a little message here in the chat window. Give yourself a shout out. Tell us what part of the world you're joining from. Another favour you can do me is hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever we go live with a new episode here on SmugMug Live. Today we've got David Grover from Capture One. Later this week we have Connor McNeil. Connor, known as the fella, is a great travel photographer. It's a very difficult time in that industry at the moment. He's going to be giving us a little insight into the state of travel photography at the moment. He will be joining us on Friday this week, so please join back here on Friday. But for today, it's catching up with David. So let's see if David's there. Hi, David. Are you with us?
Hello. Yes, I'm with you.
Good stuff. How are you doing?
Body and spirit. Yeah.
In body and spirit. Well, that's good. At least I'll take 2 out of 3. How are you doing? You well?
Yeah, pretty good. Pretty good.
Good. Where do we find you today?
I am sitting in the broadcast suite, otherwise known as a shed, in the UK at the currently. Yeah. So not Denmark side at the moment.
Not Denmark at headquarters, and likewise, no. I'm not in San Francisco at headquarters, but we're both in the UK. Let's see who's joining. We've got a few shout-outs already. We've got John Brown joining us. John was on an episode the other day and introduced me to this incredible place called the Dog Pound.
Dog Pound,
Dog Pound in Alberta, yeah. Welcome back, John. Good to see you again. Gert,
I'm sure there's some history behind that somewhere.
There must be a story behind Dog Pound. Gert is joining us from Holland. Good evening, Gert. Jeff is joining us from Western Canada. Ryan is joining from San Diego. Hi, Ryan. Good to see you. Stephen is joining from Idaho. I follow David Grover everywhere. He's the best. We found your stalker.
Yeah. should I look over my shoulder?
He's outside. Thanks for joining, Steve.
Scraping on the window.
Yeah, there's some person called Emily Teague says, those accents. Sorry, Emily, we don't have accents. You're the one that has the accent. So
exactly.
There's lots of accents on the call today. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate it. Oh, Tina's in the house as well. Tina says, who are these good-looking fellas? Oh, she's obviously watching another stream.
She's watching a different stream.
Yeah, quite clearly not watching this one. Thank you, Tina. We appreciate the encouragement.
The humour.
The humour, yeah. Tina very kindly joined me last week here on SmugMug Live. So if you haven't seen that episode yet, go back and catch up with Tina. She talked us through some of her beauty work and indeed showed us some of her editing in Capture One, which is cool. I know you do a lot of work with Tina yourself, David, right?
Yeah, definitely. She's one of our Capture One ambassadors. Done a few webinars with her as well. She's popped up on our channels quite a bit and helps us out in tons of ways.
Yeah, and Tina, Emily as well. So
yep, Emily too. She helps us out on our group, Capture One Creative Lab. So if you join that, you may well find yourself chatting with Emily and Emily running lots of things there too.
Yeah, busy bees. Jackie is joining us from Texas. It's a big star. That'll be the Lone Star State, right? Ernest is joining us from Washington State in a place called Arran.
Lots of West Coast.
Yeah, lots of West Coast. Cameron Weir is joining us from a decidedly cold Scotland. Cameron is a frequent watcher of the show. Hi, Cameron, good to see you. It is chilly, hence the hoodies here in Scotland at the moment. It is 1st of September, David. So
I know.
Meteorologically speaking, it is the start of autumn or fall.
Is it really?
Yes.
Really, technically now autumn. That's depressing.
As far as the meteorologists go, as far as the weather people are concerned, we're in autumn. And certainly here in Scotland.
I'm sure it will peak again next week into another heat wave.
Probably. Who knows at this point, right? 2020, anything
exactly.
could happen.
Could be anything.
Could be snow or lava. Yeah. Who knows? At this point. Emily says, yes, come join the Capture One Facebook group and chat with me.
Yep.
Yeah, but not just now. Once the show's finished.
Afterwards.
Or unless you can multitask, but catch up with that afterwards. A couple of things to mention before we get started. If you are currently one of our Flickr Pro subscribers, and if you have Flickr Pro, then you can get a Flickr perk at the moment, which is a 35% discount off your subscription at Capture One. If you are considering having a SmugMug account and you join up for a new SmugMug account at the moment, you'll also get an offer for 35% discount off Capture One. So if you're looking to get into the Capture One game, if you haven't already, then certainly consider starting a SmugMug account or getting a Flickr Pro account, and it's definitely well worth checking out those offers. So I appreciate you giving us those offers, David.
Pleasure.
Should be pretty cool. So you've been here before.
I have.
You know the game.
Yeah.
For the next hour, you are
we're
mine.
just going to roll the last show's recording. Yep.
Yeah. So I've got the last recording lined up. Me and you are going to have a beer while we play that last recording.
That. Nobody would know. Yeah.
I'll just keep an eye on the live questions, and we'll butt in as we see live questions. No, we thought we would have David back to, go a little bit deeper or look at some other things that we didn't touch on last time. There was a lot of questions after the last show. A lot of people were really excited about what you showcased last time. But one of the questions I did see after the show was maybe just touching on the import process to Capture One. A few people are looking to change over from other products that they're using just now, and it might be nice to maybe look at the flow of importing, editing, and then maybe even if we have time, just the export options
we
as
can
well.
touch on that as well. Yeah, for sure.
And of course, at any point, sorry, I'm laughing because Tina has just put weather banter, so British. Yeah, if you get two British guys together, we're definitely going to mention the weather. Yeah, absolutely. Do Germans not talk about the weather?
Maybe not.
It's just always grey, right? Sorry, Dean. You're a adopted Brit anyway at this point.
Exactly. She talks about the weather too. So
yeah. At any point today, if you have a really, really, really difficult question for David,
really
post
difficult.
them. Post them in the chat window. Do me a favor, if you're going to ask a question, start the question with the word question. It helps me find it in amongst just the general chat, which you're more than welcome to chat amongst yourself in there. I know so many of you are very helpful at answering questions as you see them coming up, so that's great. Feel free to do that. But if you have a direct question for myself or David, hopefully just David, then start it with the word question, and that will help me find it easier in the chat window. But let's see if your screen is sharing, and then you can talk us through the import process, David.
Yeah, sure.
Right, you're on screen.
I'm on screen. Good stuff. So yeah, last time I kind of talked, I guess, features more than anything, wasn't it? So we kind of picked out a few different things. So as opposed to just repeating that, which would be kind of boring, as Alastair said, we'd just run through an import process, but we keep it super basic just so you can see how simple it is. And then I've picked out 6 or 7 shots which we can just edit, which kind of ties into some of the stuff we spoke about last time, hopefully. So let's just close this catalog with actually some of Emily's shots. So I'm just going to shut that one down, and we're going to make a new catalog. So if you're used to Lightroom, that's a similar principle of having a centralized database. Call it a library, call it a catalog, similar kind of thing, which kind of keeps an eye on all your photos, knows the adjustments, metadata, and those kinds of things. So just for this purpose, we're going to make a SmugMug Live catalog, and it's going to be in my pictures folder, as you can see. So let's say OK. So we've got a brand new empty catalog. Now, there's no reason why you can't have multiple catalogs. You don't have to store everything in one. So if you want different catalogs for different clients, different kinds of photos, you can do that. That's no problem. Hopefully the enormous button in the middle that says import images is fairly obvious what this does.
What does that do, David?
Yeah, I wonder. Yeah. Now that does disappear after the subsequent imports, but over in the top left, there's also an import button with the same icon. So same. So let's hit the enormous button in the middle. And really, this opens up a secondary dialog or a window, whatever you want to call it, which allows you to select, a bunch of photos and decide what you want to do with them. Now, as I was tinkering with this earlier, it's pre-selected what I was going to import. So essentially, all you need to do is choose the source, where your picture's coming from. So let's choose a folder. I've got a little external hard drive. I've put them on the external hard drive on purpose, just so we can talk about a different aspect of catalog workflow. And we're just going to grab this folder here, SmugMug Live, which I'm sure you don't want to watch hundreds and hundreds of pictures import. So I've just picked out, 6 or 7 shots that we can have a look at. Probably won't get a chance to edit all of them, but we shall do our best. So that's just given me a view of those pictures that I've pulled in. And really, starting from the top down, the second window, import to, what do we want to do with those shots? Now, as these are already safely stored on a little external hard drive, I've got a couple of choices. So I can leave them in their current location, which kind of makes sense, because Capture One will know how to access them and they're safely stored on my external hard drive. I can choose to copy them somewhere else. Let's say that external hard drive is just something I use for traveling or shuttling stuff back and forth, and I want to put them in my permanent place of archive, wherever that may be. But I'm just going to say current location. Now, of course, if you're importing from memory card, you don't want to leave them on the memory card. You want to choose a folder where to put them. So that's why there's those couple of options there. And that's all you really have to do to, do a very simple import into Capture One. All this other stuff underneath, backup, naming, metadata, adjustments, these are all additional things you can do in the import process. So if I wanted to add some basic metadata like it says here, now these aren't all my pictures, so I should probably delete that so I don't get sued. And we can add adjustments in the form of presets and so on. But for now, we just keep it super simple and say import all, and in come our shots, as you can see. Now, very quickly before it disappears, you'll see this activity window pop up, which simply tells us various things that are happening in Capture One. In this instance, it's telling us that it's making a preview of each of those shots. So what that simply means is when you're browsing through photos in Capture One, there's Tina, we don't have to recall the raw data. We're just simply looking at a little preview file, which is kind of matched to the raw file, but it's much, much faster to browse. We only need the raw data when we zoom like up to 100%, and then Capture One will quickly read the raw data where it is so we can see the image at 100%. All of that stuff's kind of happening in the background. You don't really know it's going on, but it just improves performance massively for you, but without, really any expense or trade-offs. Just to finish that little simple bit about demoing, the first tool tab that you see in Capture One's made up of these different tool tabs which have different categories of tools. The very first one is devoted to organizing your library. So down here you see under folders, it's simply showing me that I've got in this very tiny catalog 7 shots that exist in this folder, SmugMug Live, and you can see the path to their parent destination, to use the correct term. So they're stored in this little external hard drive, and that's their final destination. What we made when we started, just so you can see that as well, in our pictures folder, we made this SmugMug Live, which is our catalog. And that's really just that database that knows where those photos are that I've imported, stores all their adjustments and anything like metadata as well. If you're more used to Lightroom, all the things like moving pictures around from folder to folder, moving folders, relocating files, all that kind of stuff is totally identical. So there we go, Alastair. That was the
pretty straightforward
2-minute or 5-minute probably straightforward import process.
Yeah, pretty standard stuff, which is good, right?
Exactly. Yeah, there's nothing kind of wacky or crazy out there or anything like that. It's really the same principle that any other asset management system kind of works on. Where you're getting your images from, what do you want to do with them, and then the software stores those kind of adjustments in some kind of database, cache file, whatever you want to call it. So pretty.
Is there any recommended maximum number of images in a
Not
catalog?
really.
No.
In theory, it's infinite. There is no upper limit. It's very, very system dependent. So it kind of varies a lot on, how fast the hard drive is that Capture One is working off, like where's the catalog stored. So the way I've set this up is that my SmugMug Live catalog is stored on my internal hard drive. That's, a high performance SSD. So it's very fast read and write speed. The photos that we're looking at are stored on this external hard drive, which is also very high speed, connected by USB 3. So everything is working really nice and speedily. Now, if my shots were on some, ancient USB 1 5,000 RPM hard drive and my internal hard drive was, a slower spinning hard drive, then it wouldn't be as efficient. So there's all those kind of considerations. You can say as your catalog grows, things like the time it takes to open the catalog will take a bit longer, searches might take a bit longer, that sort of stuff. But I'm operating with a catalog of about 25,000 shots, and that opens in 30 seconds, and search is near instantaneous, and so on. So it's not like you're limited to, a few hundred images or anything like that.
No, it used to be some other softwares used to struggle when it got to. I'm being diplomatic. Used to struggle when it got to too large a volume. It kind of slowed the whole system down. But you can obviously use as many catalogs as you want, and depending on what type of photography you might want to do, you might want a catalog for every shoot or every job. But
every year is quite common as well. Some people are nervous about having, their entire life's work in one catalog just for pure security, redundancy, all that kinds of thing. Yes, of course, we always recommend to back up, just to protect on all those kinds of things. But even backups can go wrong sometimes as well. So, there is loads of different ways you can do it. But multiple catalogs is often something which is very popular as opposed to having that one enormous catalog.
I used to do one for every year, but I don't shoot so much now, so I don't I don't need to do that. The only question we got during the demo of the import was Emily having a little bit of fun. She said, "Question: who dat redhead?" And Tina answered it herself. So.
There she is.
It is Tina. Question from Cameron. Let's see. Cameron asks, when you're importing, you can apply a style to them by checking the checkbox, for example. The same type on wedding photos. So can you do some work as it's importing the image?
Yeah, exactly. So back in the import dialog, so where it says styles, if you wanted to add, any of the available styles, then that's applying that on import. Now you could argue, is that any quicker than just applying it as soon as they're imported? Sort of yes and no. But if you can tick off as many things that you need to do at the import stage, then it's just a matter of a more fluid workflow. So we could add our start point style if we had that. If we had like any metadata presets, we could add, all my contact information, metadata, and so on. So that could be a useful standard preset. We could do some renaming to your own standards, of course. So a lot of stuff you can just, tick off to kind of get done at the import process. So it's not something you then have to enter another dialog to do once the import is finished. So as a matter of efficiency, it does make perfect sense.
Cool. I'm going to ask you to scoot over slightly.
This way?
Yeah, we're losing you.
Hang on.
We're losing you.
There, how about that?
That's cool. We want to see you, right? Tell me a little bit more about styles. You showed some styles there in that dialogue. Are those are those fixed, or can you add more? Can you create your own? Can you buy some?
You can do both, really. You can create, you can adopt, you can buy, not just from us, but from other providers as well. So if we wanted to stylize this shot, so this is from Phil Penman. He's a great street photographer out in New York. So if we go to our user styles here, these are the latest style pack, which is why I've got these here. And these are kind of inspired by different film looks from Fuji and Kodak. They're not designed to this is, Kodak 200 or whatever. They're just inspired by the various different tonal ranges and looks that those films give. So scrolling down this shot, we can see the effect of the various different styles. With these particular styles, they come in three different strengths. So let's take Tina actually, because as that's a bit higher key, as we go down, we can see the effect of each style. The cool thing is, if you think, I like whatever this style, but maybe it's just a little bit too strong, or it's got too much contrast or too much of a color tint or whatever, we can actually right click and apply this style as a layer. So that means the style is on its own separate layer, as we can see in our layers panel. So essentially we've created a mask over the whole shot. So if I press M on my keyboard, you can see the mask and it's applied that style. But if it's too strong, like this is a little bit, 20% too much, we can just pull the opacity down until it gets to, the right level. So that just makes every style much more flexible, just because you have that opacity range. So yeah, you can make your own. Yes, you can buy them from us or from other style providers too, like Develop, Mastin Labs. What's the other one? Looks Like Film, RNI, which is another one too. Quite a few people making Capture One styles as well. Yeah. And of course, if you buy a style and you think, it's not quite right, there's no reason why you can't modify it slightly, and then you can just save that style over the top.
Save it as your own user style.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So what's the difference between styles and presets?
Kind of the same, kind of different. So a style
kind of the same, kind of different. Okay, moving on.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. All I needed to know.
So a style is, if you like, a collection of different tool adjustments. So you can see in this style that we added, it's got some changes to high dynamic range, it's got some changes to clarity, there's a bit of curve stuff going on. If we go to the color editor, I imagine there's little tweaks to the color editor too. So a style is like a collection of a bunch of whole different stuff that's molded together. So a whole bunch of different tool adjustments comes into one clickable style. Now a preset is just for one specific tool. So if we go into the clarity tool and click on the little three lines here, then let's go back to background, sorry. There isn't any in clarity. Let's pick something else. Let's go to exposure. So now you can see there's these various different presets, but that only affects the exposure tool. So it's a really handy thing for like, sharpening presets, metadata presets. So if you wanted to load up, all your metadata in a snap, that would be, a purpose for a preset as well. So a style is many presets, if you like.
Well, I guess the naming convention really works then. The style of stylizing the whole image with the style, exactly. And then presetting just those individual tools that you maybe have a favorite output sharpening or something.
Exactly. Output sharpening, noise reduction, metadata, as I said, grain as well, film grain. So if we look at our film grain tool, let's just zoom in so we can see the effects. So there's various different film grain presets, as you can see, which are just manipulating only the film grain tool, which is nice because if you've thrown on a preset which does all of these things, then of course a film grain one is something that you might like to vary depending on the kind of look you're going for as well, but still ties in nicely with your style. So.
Good stuff. Just another question from Cameron. Let me see if I can pull that up. He was asking, do you have other styles from other brands, camera brands like Nikon?
There is. So I don't know if I've got a Fuji or Nikon shot here. Let's see. Probably you've tricked me. You've got Canon, Sony. That's Leica, and those two are Leica. So if you have a Nikon camera, then what we can do is pick out some of the Nikon picture styles, which go towards trying to match what you can choose in camera. If you're using a Fujifilm camera, then we also have the film simulations in Capture One as well. So if you've shot with your Fujifilm camera to, Provia or something like that, then it'll come into Capture One even as a raw file with that shot. So actually, let's just open up my other catalog for a second, and then we just grab Fuji files so we can see. Nice thing is you can have more than one catalog open at once. So that's a good little extra bonus. Let's find something from Fuji. So let's go to Brian. Brian, he's a Fuji X photographer. So if we just pick out any old RAF and we look at the base characteristics tool, which I've probably hidden, I know it's down here. Let's pull this out. Then you can see we've got all the various different Fuji film simulations like so. So if Brian shoots in Eterna Cinema, for example, on his camera, it will come into Capture One showing Eterna Cinema, but of course you can always override it because it's not fully affecting the raw file. Now if we have something Nikon-like, so let's go to something which I know is Nikon shots, Nikon D610, then if we go in here, we can see the various different Nikon picture styles too. So that's the two manufacturers which we support currently with those kind of built-in styles.
Excellent, very good.
Cool.
Hope that answers your question, Cameron. Another question here, this one from Ryan. If Ryan serves me, if my memory serves me right, I think I said you were in San Diego earlier. So Ryan asks, in process recipes, I prefer to tag my personal work and my real estate work differently. Yep. Is there a way to save the tag orders so I don't have to rebuild the naming format each time?
Maybe Ryan can clarify what he means by tag? Does he mean by like the output naming or something else?
In process recipes, I prefer to tag my personal work and real estate work differently.
Yeah, it depends what he means by tag.
Yeah, just follow up with that question. Let us know what you mean by tagging.
Because it could mean keywords or it could mean output naming. So if you clarify that, Ryan, then
we'll come back to
yes, you can do it differently. But then we can, rather than show you both, we can just pick the right one that you're asking about.
So for us, the questions are delayed about 30 seconds. So why don't you move on to something else and I'll come back to that question for you.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay. So a couple of things we touched on last time. I made a list. I've got a list with a T-ring stain on it as well. So that's how prepared and professional we are here.
Very professional. Yeah,
very
sorry.
Professional.
I was just saying very professional to you as I didn't unmute myself. So both being not professional.
Classic.
Yeah.
Cool. So something that we touched on last time, we looked at a lot of different masking things, and we looked at a bit of luminosity masking and so on. But what I thought is show it a bit more in a practical sense as well, and how actually you can link luminosity masking into another mask as well to kind of power up, which is nice. And also just to show you a different example too. So we have this shot. This is from buddy John, who splits himself between the USA and Italy. Two COVID hotbeds, unfortunately. He had a terrible travel getting back and forth between the two. But anyway, John's a great guy. He's sent me a bunch of images over the coming weeks. But this is a really good example of, two different tonal ranges, which are very difficult to deal with as a single entity. So if we'd shot this as HDR or multiple exposures, then we could blend them together. But that's kind of extra shots. Pain in the ass to do if you're doing long exposures and so on. To mask it traditionally is awkward because then we'd have to cut around all these little tiny leaves and so on. So that's really difficult. So what we can, of course, ask Capture One to do is do the hard work for us and use a bunch of tools like luminosity ranges and gradient mask to kind of pick it all out automatically. So how do we do that? Now, I don't think this shot doesn't have any edits on it at all right now. So a couple of things I might do just in general is up the clarity a bit, just to kind of bring out a bit more separation and contrast in the trees. What clarity does is bump up the contrast, but it's kind of focused on the midtones. So it means that your shadows don't go all dark and mushy and the highlights don't get blown out. So that just, if we click on clarity, you can see before and after. That just gives us much better separation, a bit more 3D effect. But the mountains in the background, obviously being hit by a bunch more light, are really too bright for the rest of it. Now, if we try and deal with it individually, we could probably bring the highlights down, which isn't bad. That goes a long way. But as soon as we start to try and do something else, like I might want the shadows or the blacks a bit darker, if I do this, then it's now affecting the trees too much. So this is a shot that's really difficult to kind of deal with as a single entity. So ideally we want to cut it in two. So we want to divide out the trees from the mountains. So the first step would be to grab a gradient mask, and we're just going to draw from the top down. So you can see those three faint lines. If I press M on my keyboard, the red mask kind of shows the gradation of that. So it's 100%. By the time it's got to the middle, it's 50. By the time it's got to the end, it's down to 0. Now that's too much of a gradual fall off. So I want to make it asymmetric as opposed to symmetric. So if I hold my Alt key down on the keyboard and just pull this up, now we can make the fall off a bit more abrupt and just kind of center that around there. So now we've got a mask which is really just dealing with this part. It's better, but it's still not perfect. So if I bring the exposure down and let's say the contrast up a bit and a bit more clarity and bring the highlights down, that's looking much better. But now the only thing that we're kind of going to suffer with is we've got this darker line across the top of the trees because our gradient mask is snapping over the top of that. So this kind of now looks very much what it would look like if we'd shot that with a graduated filter, which is why graduated filters, aren't necessarily perfect, and you have to be aware of that limitation. So what we can do now, the first thing we're going to do is look at the mask as a grayscale mask. So if we turn this on, that's in the little eyeball icon here. White shows us where the masking is at its strongest, and black is where there's no masking, and then we've got grey gradations in between. So any mask, we can then put some kind of luma range constraint on top of it. So the mask will only be present at the tonal ranges that we request. So if I hit the luma range button here, what we want to do is kind of cut out the darker tones. So if I say, let's include all the brightest tones, and then as we move this up, you'll gradually see the tree line pop in, and that's probably too much. We can kind of get to something like that. So now if we say apply, turn our mask off, or press M on our keyboard, we've now got rid of that. If we turn this layer on and off, it's now kind of just doing the gradated mask just behind. But it's not perfect, because if we look in kind of 100%, the mask that we made was a little bit on the crude side. So if we look at our grayscale mask once more, we can see it's sort of a little bit binary. It's not very smooth around those leaves. Now, bearing in mind how complex that structure is. The good thing is that we can always modify our gradient mask, our luminosity range. So if we go back into that, I'm just going to pull this down a bit maybe, so we get rid of those few bits there. And underneath are two sliders which we hadn't activated yet, and that deals how the luminosity mask wraps around the edges. So with radius at 0, the slider underneath, this one's sensitivity, has no effect. So right now our separation around edges is kind of the most basic it can be. So if we give radius a bit of a boost, like so, and then put sensitivity to 100, what you'll see is it's now kind of wrapped around those leaves in a much, much finer, more subtle way. If we put this down to 0, essentially that's doing is feathering the edges. So think of 0 as a full-on feather, and then you can think of 100 as full-on refining around that edge. So I'm going to go for 100, and then let's just turn our mask on and off. And now really, if we turn this layer back on and off, it kind of sits really nicely and really accurately behind it. So now, whatever we want to do to this layer, we can kind of mess around to our heart's content. Now, naturally, it's going to be a bit brighter because it's got the full bore of the sun on it. So we have to be a little bit considerate of how it should look. So I wouldn't want to make it, too dark. So I'd probably just move that down there, maybe richen up the blacks or drop the shadows a bit, and also take the brightness down, which is more of a mid-tone kind of correction. And we could also bring the highlights, probably not too much, just bring the whites down. So that just sits much, much nicer behind there. And what we can also do with our gradient mask, we can also move this around a bit as well. Now it's still got the same luminosity constraint on it. So what we can do is we can kind of move this around, and then that fall off will kind of vary behind there nicely, but it will always find its edge around the trees.
That's great. What a difference it made! Yeah, what a difference it made to the trees, or the lack of effect it had on the trees. When you first did it with the straight grading, you've got the dark tops of the trees. Now it looks very natural. Could you go back to show me the mask with the Luma range?
Yeah, so that's fully refined.
Can you zoom in a little bit? So can you see how it's still masking out some of the shadows on the cliff? Can you paint those back in?
If we wanted to, fully get rid of this area, for example. Yeah, what we could do is, because it's just, let's see, we could probably take our eraser and let's just, we could rasterize it first. So right now it's dynamic because it's a gradient mask. Mm-hmm. So we can always go in and tweak it and change the fall off. But let's say we're kind of happy with how it looks. We've got a good wrap around the trees and so on, but there's a couple of little sort of areas that we want to clean up. So if I try and use the eraser brush and click on it, Capture One says, do you want to rasterize the mask? Which kind of means lock it in place.
Yeah, you can't adjust it anymore.
Yeah, it can't. So the luminosity will be set, the gradient will be set, and so on. We can also access that by doing a right click and saying rasterize. So now this mask, I can go ahead, not erase, sorry. I can go ahead and brush. We grab our brush, full opacity and flow. Let's just make it a bit softer. So if there's any little mistakes like that, I could brush over it. But as it's the gradient, it's going to be really hard to pull those out. But what I'm thinking, if we look at the mask itself, there's really, so it's this bit here is what we're looking at. The chance of you actually being able to see those edits, if you like, are pretty minimal, I would think.
Yeah, and I'm sure Cameron just asked, does radius and sensitivity, does it save you having to brush or paint back in or out? So I guess you kind of were inspired by that question by myself, where the radius and sensitivity made it very easy to get a really nice mask. But
exactly,
I was hoping that you could then just go in and paint out maybe some of the.
We could if it wasn't a gradient mask, but the fact that it's that super smooth gradient. So up here it's white, and then moving down to grey, and then it would have been it's black down here somewhere. To try and paint that bit out might be a little bit tricky. I wonder if we take our brush again, and if we did so this probably isn't going to work. Oh, we could fade it out a little bit. Hang on, let's do even lower flow. Big soft brush, and then we could probably just limit it a little bit. So that works ever so slightly. So that's just gradually lightening that area. But I think because it's such, the opacity of this is tiny, the chance of you actually seeing your adjustment on it kind of pretty next to nothing. So yeah, cool. But that's good because that pulled out what Rasterize did as well. Yeah. So anything like a gradient mask or a radial mask is always dynamic. So if we do another layer and just did like a radial mask like this, it's always dynamic. So if you're adjusting your shot and you think, actually it doesn't look too bad. If you want to just focus on this area a bit. So if I draw that radial and bring the brightness down as a kind of vignette, and just open up the black so it doesn't go too dark, then at any point I can always go back to this layer and shift my radial around. I could even do a luminosity mask on top of this radial if I wanted to. But at any point, if I want to lock it in place, then you have to right click and rasterize. But that's only if you want to brush in, brush over it, take a little bit out, add a little bit more in, something like that.
Excellent, cool. Ryan's come back with some clarification about his question. He says, output naming, using the smart tags like date, name of original file versus real estate address.
Got it, yep. So I think for output naming, what you probably want to do in your different recipes is that what you've got is a subname token here as well. So for a different recipe, so let's just make example 1. So if I put subname in here, real estate, you'll have to use a bit of your own poetic license, Ryan, to try and see how it could apply. And then if I put in here personal, like so, personality, personal, so we've got real estate and personal there. And in your output naming, you can pick out a token called subname. So if I start typing sub, then it will give me an example like subname, like so. So you can see here, let's just put a little underscore. So on this process recipe, it would add personal, and on this process recipe, it would add real estate. So the subname entry here allows the output naming to be a bit more dynamic based on the recipe that you've chosen. So hopefully you can extract something from that which helps. Don't forget also for output naming, you can save presets. So you can switch presets quite quickly. That's by clicking this little box here. But the benefit of doing it this way is that I could process the same shot with 2 different recipes with a slightly different output name. So fairly high level there, Ryan. So hopefully we didn't lose everyone else.
Hopefully that answers that. Can you clarify? So we spoke about styles, we spoke about presets, but now you're talking about recipes, and Ryan was asking questions about recipes. Can you just clarify what a recipe is?
Yeah, so that's kind of skipping ahead to the end of the workflow, if you like. So you've done all your edits, happy with all your shots, and let's just bring back the browser for a second, and then you want to process out to your final format or export, whatever terminology you want to use. So you want to go to TIFF, JPEG, etc., etc. So the traditional slow way to do that is to hit the export button, and that just gives you a simple dialog, which is where do you want to export to? Do they need to be TIFF, JPEGs, and so on? Do you want to add some other stuff to it, like some metadata, blah, 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 and so on? That's kind of inefficient because it's one action at a time. So if you wanted TIFFs and JPEGs, then you'd have to go into this dialog, set this up as TIFF, hit export, and then go back into the dialog, change this to JPEG. Maybe you need to reset some other things and then export that. So it's an inefficient back and forth in and out process. So instead, what process recipes allow you to do, it's kind of an export preset, if you like, is to set up how you would like to export your photos in a repeatable way. So for example, there's a couple which I've got set here, JPEG 2048 pixel for web use. Whoever we were demoing to must have been an Andrew, because it also adds a watermark called Andrew on the shot as well. This one is just a full-size JPEG, full-size TIFF, and so on. But the idea is you can just check on which recipes you want, hit process, and then they get exported out into their different formats. So this one is a TIFF, as you can see by the format. This one is a JPEG, as you can see. And they can go to the same export location. They can go to their unique export locations. They can have different naming, as we just saw with Ryan, and a whole bunch of other stuff as well. Watermarks, as you saw, output, sharpening adjustments. It's really powerful. The idea is that, as I said, to prevent you going back and forth into a document, and to just make the whole process much, much faster.
Can you go to multiple export locations? Can it export to 2 places at the same time?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. What, the same shot or the?
Yeah, if you, I don't know how deep it goes. Like if you had one shot that you maybe wanted to export as a TIFF in one place, but you wanted to export it as a JPEG to somewhere else, can it do that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
So if we had, let's just make one. We get rid of Ryan's examples and this one. And let's get rid of that one as well. So let's say we wanted to do your example. We wanted to have a JPEG that was 2000 pixels wide, or WOD, close enough. So the format down here, let's just turn those off. So the format down here would be JPEG. Quality we could set, we could decide on our profile, and I said I want it to be the width in pixels is 2000, even though my title is wrong. Let's just change that. 2000. And we've got a couple of choices. Output naming, let's get rid of Ryan's example. So that's just going to its custom name, to the name that it's currently called. So whatever name is shown here will just be used in the output. Output location, so we can use a global output location. So this is just currently set to the pictures folder, or we can choose its own location. So down here, I could just select a folder, which could be, cloud storage or something. Let's do for example, a theoretical Dropbox, or other cloud options are available. So this process recipe is going to go to our theoretical Dropbox. And then if we make another one, let's call this a TIFF full size. Again, we just change it here. So this is already set up as a TIFF by default. So I'll leave that. And then this one, we want to go to a different location. So I'll select a folder. Let's just chuck it in the pictures folder. Or we make a new folder just called TIFF, like so. And say open. And then now those two recipes are going to, they're two unique locations. And the cool thing is we can also ask Capture One to add dynamic subfolders. So for example, on our JPEG here, if I put in the subfolder recipe name, if I start typing recipe, then it will just use the recipe name to make a folder. We can do the same one here as well, recipe name. And if I just export like the top 4 pictures. So we've got 2 process recipes running. That's going to our theoretical Dropbox, because I don't have Dropbox installed on this one, and TIFF, and let's just say process.
I've just worked out the simple thing that I was missing was multiple check marks.
Exactly.
So you can check more than one recipe at times. So it's not a single recipe that's going to.
It's like whatever
locations.
One you want to action.
It's how many processes you want to run at the same time, and I was missing that part. So that's a down moment for me today. So,
and that's just scratching the tip of the iceberg, if you like, because the recipe name option you can see here. That's just one tiny thing. You can pull out any metadata item. You can use a whole bunch of different location recipes. You can send the file back alongside the raw file, any place of your choosing. The sky's the limit, really. If we look at the various different tokens, let's just click on this box. These are all the location tokens that you can pick. It's highly unlikely you're going to need all of those, but somebody somewhere has a use for it somewhere, like dividing them up by different cameras. Like if you shoot weddings with 2 different bodies, you want to separate out the shots from shooter A and shooter B, then you can do that, and so on. Tons of stuff.
That's cool. Nice little comment from Randy Pollock. Hi, Randy, frequent watcher of the show. Nice to see you today. He says, I always export an image for SmugMug, one for my website, one for Instagram, and one for printing. An awesome feature of Capture One. So, yeah.
Excellent.
Very cool. All right, there's no other questions at the moment. So I'm going to give a kind of last shout out for questions. We're getting near the end of the hour that we have scheduled with.
Time flies, eh?
With David. So yeah, get your questions, get your last few questions in for David while I get him to show us one other feature that he thinks we need to cover today. What else have we got? Let's
have a look at this shot from Phil out in New York. Cool shot with a Leica something, Leica SL. Straight out of camera, so no edits at the moment. but it's a good example because it's such extreme ranges of light, if you like, or dynamic range. Then it kind of highlights quite a few of the adjustments, how far you can go with those, and sort of tweaks you can do with the color editor as well. Before we get to that, let's straighten it up because it is slightly wonky. So if we grab our Keystone vertical tool, let's just zoom in a bit. This is a handy little tool just for fixing any kind of architectural slant or wonk. So the idea is you just line up these lines to either side of the error. The furthest out you can do it, the better, because you'll get less margin of error. Now it's a bit dark, so I'm just going to brighten it up for a second. Let's see. So I'm going to pop over this one here. Let's see about that. And then when we say, let's just get rid of my brightness, and we say apply, then you see it was ever so subtle, but it just fixed that little teeny tiny keystone error. So now if we go back, now it's just looking a little bit more upright. So if we go to our Keystone tool in itself, it just dialed in those adjustments. Now by default, the amount will be 80, because if you're correcting a building and you correct it to 100%, then sometimes it looks a little bit unnatural, especially if we're looking at up a tall building. So by default, it's kind of dialed into 80, so it looks a bit more natural. So I'm just going to pop in 100 here, so then it will just pop up a little bit more. So if we do before and after, you can just see the difference in its perspective. Anyway, that was a little sidebar to the rest of it. So this has got, extreme dynamic range. We've got the bright neon sign, we've got the shadow behind it. We've got 4 different sliders which can help us liberate that. So I would probably, if we go all the way with shadows and blacks, you can see just how much is going on in there. But what I would do is kind of counteract these two, which sounds weird. I want to open up the shadows a bit, but I don't want that kind of milkiness coming in. So I just want to drop the blacks down a bit more, so we get a bit of a hint, but it still looks realistic, not some kind of horrible HDR shot. Now, second thing that we're going to do is if we look at the highlights, we can bring down our highlights a little bit. We're never going to recover this because it's, it's way too out of range, but just pulling that down, those highlights, gets us a bit more detail. And the whites, which is the real top end, if I just pull this back and forth, you can see exactly what's sneaking in. So I'm just going to pull that down there. It's still got to look bright, but it's a bit more natural. Now we've got this great kind of red tone all the way on the signage. And what we can look at in our color editor is just how specific we can be. So if we grab our advanced color editor, I'm going to go straight to advanced, click on our red tone. Capture One gives us an indication of exactly the area that we're going to affect. Now that's kind of hard to visualize. So if we click on View Selected Color Range, everything will go to monochrome, which is not part of that selection. So if I turn this back off and turn it back on, everything goes to black and white, which is not part of that. So if we want, we can just target the red, or we could actually get in the little pointy down arrow as well, or we could cut that right out. So once I'm happy with my selection, I'm just going to stick to the red for the minute. So that's pretty good red selection. Turn that off. Whoops, just undo that. I did another pick. Let's zoom out, and then now if we grab our lightness, I can make that red just a little bit darker, maybe a bit more saturated, like so, just to make it a bit richer. And if I pull this one up, then you see it also affects the little pointy down arrow, or we can just restrict that. So that's kind of expanding or reducing our range. And if we go this way, then if you actually look down on the front here in the water, let's zoom in a bit, that's picked up obviously some reflection from the signage itself. So if I cut out the lower saturation, you can see just on the kind of puddles around here, if I don't want my color edit to affect those, we could just really make sure it's refined just to the pick. So it's a great tool for not only making really super, can't can't speak, super specific adjustments, but also broader ones like we saw as well. But just a few little tweaks like that makes a massive difference. And of course, not are we restricted to one color. If I wanted to pick elsewhere, then I can make another click, or we just grab this one, make this one a bit darker or brighter. We could actually increase the difference between the yellows and the reds, and just adjust to our heart's content. It's a really good tool.
Yeah, very good. Like it a lot. When you're doing the keystoning, do you have any like lens profiling?
There is, but that's two different things. So when we're talking about Keystone, that's if I just grab vertical and just massively exaggerate that, that's kind of fixing the falling down building syndrome when you look up. So what we're doing with the lens profiling, you can see here under lens, that's fixing distortion, sharpness, and light fall off. So this was with, what lens did we have? A 2490 at around 40 mil. So there's probably not a massive amount of distortion. So if we feel that the lens doesn't distort heavily, then we leave these sliders alone, or at least the distortion slider. If I put 100 in here, see, it barely moves. It's obviously a very good lens to be that distortion free.
Looks like an expensive lens, though.
Probably an extremely expensive lens. So I would hope it wouldn't be distorting at 40 mil. And also for sharpness fall off, we can, to some extent, fix any softness towards the edge of the lens, and light fall off as well. And again, there's very little light fall off on this lens, which means everything is set to 0. So you'll find with cheaper lenses, probably they're going to distort more, they might have more chromatic aberration, the light fall off is going to be harsher, so then you might see those values jump around a little bit more depending on the kind of lens that you're using. And these profiles we do ourselves in the factory in Copenhagen. Some manufacturers like Sony embed lens data into the lens. Fuji does as well. I think the new Nikon Z cameras also do the same thing. So then you might find an option that pops up in here that says manufacturer profile. Looks like Leica does the same, but that's using, if you like, data from the camera, not data that we've tested. So we could argue whose data is better or whatever. I'm sure they're also showing that their lens doesn't have a great deal of distortion as well. Yeah. So yeah, but in combination with those two things, you're pretty much covered distortion free.
Cool. Little question specifically about this image. Cameron was asking, can you get rid of the bent pole as it's a distraction, or would you need to go into PS for that?
Which pole? This one?
Yeah.
Maybe. Let's try. So if we grab our healing brush, let's just make it a bit smaller, because we can probably grab a bit of the wall there. So I'm just going to draw down like so and see what Capture One picks. Wants to pick that, but if we move this down to there like so, then we could probably do a pretty good job. I might fiddle around with that a little bit more if I was doing it for real, and actually, because it's picked up that mark on the wall, I might want to just go up there a little bit like so. So yes, there you go, we could. And I'd probably make that a little bit softer, but that would be a relatively simple thing to get rid of, I would say. There we go.
Cool. Hope that answers your question, Cameron.
And we can have multiple heal points as well. So if we wanted to clean up some other stuff, or like, the rubbish down here, or get rid of one of these posts or whatever, then we could do that too. So I can probably hide that quite comfortably with just a little bit of dark tone. So it's got rid of. And the reflection, if we were being critical as well.
That actually brings me to a question I'd like to ask you. And I think, Tina showed this last week, but I'd wonder if you could show it again. If you wanted to go into Photoshop and do something that needed a bit more heavy lifting, could you showcase the kind of round trip and how you would do that?
Yeah. So it's just a right click. We've got edit with and open with, two very different things. Edit with is always going to make a additional file, so like a TIFF, a JPEG, PNG, whatever. Open with simply means open in your chosen application. So this would open that DNG into Photoshop, but we don't want to do that. We want to export with the adjustments that we've done in Capture One and then go out to Photoshop. So if I say edit with Photoshop, and let's just do an 8-bit TIFF and say edit. Why could you not process file? Let's have a look. The output, the output folder is not writable. So hang on a second. Let's just do that again. It's probably a weird permissions thing. 1 second. Let's just try that. Volumes traveler. Oh, it's because it's on my external drive. That's why. And that's Catalina being specifically security minded. So let's just see if I can fix that. Files and folders.
I'll hide your screen while you're messing about with your
do that.
settings. What's that? Is that your credit card number? Hang on, let me get
it. Hang on a second. Tell you what I'll do is I'm just going to move that shot to a different spot.
Or just do it with another shot.
Hang on, let's just do this.
While we're doing that, we get a nice comment from Ryan, who came back and said the new heal tool is amazing. So thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Ryan.
He approves of your new healing tool.
Good.
And Cameron said cool, so definitely answered his question.
Oh, I think Catalina is just being a
not playing ball.
Bugger to me at the moment. It's a security thing that Capture One has to ask permission for access to your files, folders, and all those kinds of things. And System Prefs, it actually has that all set up nicely. So it's probably one of those things where I have to log out and log in again. But you don't want me to do that. So explaining what I would said, if you do an edit with to Photoshop, all that really happens is alongside the DNG file, you'll see your whatever TIFF in this case next to it, and then it will open up into Photoshop. Then you can do your edits or what you need to do, save it, and then it will just simply update automatically in Capture One. So the preview will refresh all automatically and so on. And then if you want to open it in Photoshop once more, you would just right click on your TIFF and say open with, and that's all there is to it. So it's pretty simple. Just important to remember the difference between edit with always creates an additional file. Open does what it says on the tin, just opens it up.
Okay. And when you're in Photoshop and you want to come back, well, how do you save it? What is the...
Just save it.
Just
nothing fancy. Close it, save it.
Pops you straight back to Capture One.
Exactly. No need to change its destination or any of that. Just save it. Yep.
Cool.
Easy peasy.
Cool. Got a couple of things before we finish. I'm going to ask you to do me a favour, and before we finish up, hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification. That way, as I say, you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of SmugMug Live. Next one this week is on Friday with Connor McNeil joining us from Northern Ireland to talk about the state of the travel photography industry. So do that for me. I really, really appreciate it. Give us a thumbs up if you haven't already on this episode as a way of showing our appreciation to David. I also wanted to point out there's a few people asking if there was a current offer for those of you that are already subscribing to SmugMug. There is an offer available at the moment for 25% off with Capture One. Nice. If you use the discount code TAKE25OFF. Mm-hmm. But if you were to start a Flickr Pro account, you would get 35% off. So you can go do the math yourself and see which one you want to do.
And you get Flickr Pro as well.
And you get Flickr Pro, and there's a lot of other perks in there as well. So that's pretty cool. Right, we have one last question that we're going to get to, and it comes from our dear friend Tina,
right,
who asks, as all Grover fanboys and girls know, David loves goats. But let's clear this up once and for all. Which goat is the best goat?
Well, no one's going to understand that at all, are they?
What's the best goat, David?
The best goat is a punching goat for sure.
A punching goat.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you want to elaborate on what a punching goat is?
Probably not. No,
No.
or a kicking. We could say a kicking goat.
Kicking goat.
It's a very long story which requires drinks, I think.
I've got nowhere to be. Quite
So
clearly,
hold that thought. Yeah.
quite clearly, some inside jokes going on there. Which the next time you see David in person, buy him a drink, ask him about the goats. And,
The goats that punch. Yep.
Tina disagrees.
Oh, really?
Tina says Pygora goat is the best.
A Pygora goat. Okay.
Yeah.
That's also in my top 3. Yeah.
You have a top 3.
Not to be surpassed by the pygmy goat, of course.
Pygmy goat. So that's kicking goat, Pygora goat, and pygmy goat. That's your top 3.
Top 3. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel bad for all those other goats out there that didn't make it into the top 3.
You've got to have a favourite.
Definitely buying you a drink to get this story, says Emily. Yeah, for sure. So on the last episode, Tina had a little cameo from Azuki, her new cat. Next episode, I want a cameo from a goat, David.
From a goat, okay. I don't think I'm just looking around. Can't see any goats around. Yeah.
Oh gosh, we've started the thing. Emily now is saying hers favourite is the Russian white goat.
Oh, I have to look that one up. Maybe it needs to come into the Hall of Fame.
We could be starting a whole theme here of a new episode. What is your favourite goat?
What is your favourite goat?
Live.
Yeah.
Right, before this descends into complete chaos,
quite,
we shall call it a day. David, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm sure people have picked up some nuggets there. I know I've learned that I need to check some extra check marks on my exporting. So thank you for that. Sorry, recipes. Right?
Recipes.
Yeah. Yep. You can do as many as you want if you just remember to check all the boxes.
That's the whole point.
That was my takeaway. So thank you, David. We'll hopefully do this again at some point. Wherever you're watching today, thank you so much. Look after yourself. Stay safe. Be good. Be kind. And we'll catch you on the next episode of SmugMug Live. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Cheers, everyone. Bye.